email us later so that we can add it to our prayer list. And if you have needs for food or some other assistance, please let us know. We are here to help, and we have the availability to help you. So please, don't be embarrassed or ashamed. Please let us know how we can help you. We are making plans to reopen the building for in-persons, and so you will be ready, because we have a lot to put into place to keep everybody safe and to still be able to worship God together. And today is graduation Sunday. Now, you know, our 2020 grads have not had the opportunity to be together and experience all those things as seniors. So we are celebrating our seniors today. And I'm going to, we have two of them participating in worship today, Chris Jenkins and Kadir Lewis. And so we're going to have Michelle Wilson, our youth director, come and share our grads with you today.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Wilson, youth director here at Asbury. We're incredibly proud of our 2020 graduates. I'm honored to take this moment to introduce them, each of them to you. Okay.
Trinice Hopkins.
Trinice Hopkins. After graduating from Early College, high school, Trinice will be at Delaware State University. Chris Jenkins. After graduating from Smyrna High School, Chris plans to continue his job at Home Depot and may attend Del Tech and major in anything. Matthew Knight. After graduating from Smyrna High School, Matt plans to continue working at British Junction and attend Del Tech in law, marine biology, and dreams to work in New Zealand someday. Kadir Lewis. After graduating from Smyrna High School, Kadir will be attending the University of Delaware, majoring in engineering. Archimore Roberts Jr. After graduating from Smyrna High School, Archimore will be attending Arizona State University, majoring in electrical engineering. Our college graduate, Nathaniel Schweiner. After graduating from Caesar Rodney High School in 2016, Nathaniel attended Harvard, earning his bachelor's degree. Recently, he was commissioned in the Navy as an ensign. College graduate Sierra Vasquez. After graduating from Smyrna High School in 2016, Sierra attended the University of Delaware, earning her bachelor's degree in health behavioral science. This fall, she will continue classes at the University of Delaware to earn her master's degree. She plans to be an animal assisted therapist for children with disabilities. We are so proud of each of us.
Stand with us and we're going to sing.
joy of the Lord is our strength. We bow down, we worship you now. How great, how awesome is He. Together we sing. Everyone sing. Holy is the Lord, God Almighty. The earth is filled with His glory. Holy is the Lord, God Almighty. The earth is filled with His glory. The earth is filled with His glory. It is rising up all around. The anthem of the Lord renowned. It is rising up all around. It's the anthem of the Lord renowned. And together we sing. Everyone sing. Holy is the Lord, God Almighty. The earth is filled with His glory. Holy is the Lord, God Almighty. The earth is filled with His glory. The earth is filled with His glory. Holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. Holy, holy. Holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. Holy, holy.
And we're going to take this time to pray. And if you've been watching the news, Lord, we need you to bring peace to our nation, to bring calm to officers. We lift up our brothers and sisters of color. We lift up the businesses and the owners that are being hurt by all of this chaos. We lift up, Lord, we just need your presence. We need you to revive us with your spirit and heal our land. Lord, we know that this is just one thing out of all of the things that are causing suffering as we continue to move through this virus with over 100,000 people, lives lost, Lord, to this virus. And Lord, we will never get them back again. The hurt and the grieving that comes from that. And Lord, we just lift up all of those who are suffering still from loneliness, from the isolation and being stuck in their homes, and maybe they have all they need, but Lord, it's the humanity, the human touch, the human contact. And I know because I've heard the hearts of people that have called me and talked about how lonely they are. Lord, we just ask you to be especially present with them and have people check in with them and call them and let them know that they are remembered and thought about and loved. Lord, we lift up all of those that are considered on the front lines, our healthcare workers, our first responders that are trying so hard to keep ahead of all of this and having to deal with it up close and personal. And Lord, we ask for protection to be on them. And Lord, we especially ask for your wisdom for our leaders. It's such an uncertain time, and we just don't know what decision is best sometimes. So Lord, we just ask you to give them your wisdom, your knowledge, so that they can do the best that can be done. Lord, we know that this is hard for all of us. And Lord, we just ask that you also give us the vision to see where you are working in the midst of all of it. And that you would give us the strength and the power to be your hands and feet, your voice of calm and reason and love in the middle of all of this. So Lord, we pray all of this in your precious Son's name, who also taught us to pray. So join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses,
as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.
Amen. And we again want to thank all of those that have been faithfully sending in their offerings and donations to continue the ministries of this church. We just thank you for all that you are doing. It has been such a blessing. And we know that not everyone's able to do that either. And I don't want you to feel bad about that either, because we are here for you. And we want to minister to you. So Lord, we just thank you for all of those that have been giving. And there are so many ways to give, and you can find those on our website and our Facebook page too. And again, thank you for giving. So now we're going to sing again. So here we are.
For me, the body of Jesus, broken for you. He offered his body, he poured out his soul. Jesus was broken, that we might be whole. Broken for me, broken for you. The body of Jesus for you. Come to my table and with me dine. Eat up my bread and drink of my wine. Broken for me, Lord. Broken for you. The body of Jesus, broken for you. This is my body, given for you. Eat it, remembering I died for you. Broken for me, Lord. Broken for you. The body of Jesus, broken for you. This is my blood, I shed for you, for your forgiveness, making you new. Broken for me, Lord. Broken for you. The body of Jesus, broken for you. Broken for you, Lord. Broken for you. living for you.
We're going to have the song Lewis, video Lewis, sorry.
This is Acts 2, verse 2 to 21. When Pentecost day arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a sound from heaven, the house of the filled the entire house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be individual flames and fire and lighting on each one of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit led them to speak. There were pious Jews from every nation under heaven living in. When they heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were mystified because everyone heard them speaking in their native language. They were surprised and amazed, saying, "Look, aren't all of the people who are speaking their language, every one of them? How can each of us be speaking like Laconia, Judea, and Cappadocia, and Pannonia, Egypt, and the regions of Libya, formerly Cyrene, and the regions of Rome, both Egypt and Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, who heard them declaring the mighty works of God in all languages. They were all surprised and bewildered. Some asked each other, "What does this mean?" Others jeered at them, saying, "The Lord is new one." Peter stood with the other 11 apostles. He raised his voice and declared, "Greetings to everyone living in Jerusalem. Know this, listen carefully to my words. Be speaking and faith and respect. After all, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Rather, this is what was spoken to the prophet Joel. In the last days, God said, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young will see visions, your elders will dream. Even upon my servants, men and women, I will pour out my spirit in their days, and they will prophesy. I will
So it's good to have them here with us again. I'm like excited about that. So this is Pentecost Sunday. And I've been kind of watching with a heavy heart all the chaos that's been happening from the apparent murder of George Floyd, the African-American man who got in police custody after a white officer knelt on his neck for 9 minutes. And watching the heartbreaking video of this man's final moments pleading, "I can't breathe," with the crowds around him begging for the officer to get up. I see several moments when the officer could have and should have made a different choice, maybe a compassionate choice, but he kept steady on. Was this racist? I know that there are some of you who would say no, just a police officer doing his job. But as much as those of us in the white population who dismiss this as a single act and not related to race in any way, this is yet again a wake-up call to the endemic racism in our world. George Floyd is only the latest in a long string of similar acts where people of color are treated differently, profiled and threatened with death, or indeed killed, with the determining factor being the color of their skin or their cultural heritage. That is racism. We see it in living color in the death of George Floyd. And his death is not just the sin of the officers there that day, but the sin of us all. As individuals who dismiss or make excuses for these events, and as a nation that does little to make the changes necessary to help recreate our communities into the world we know it should be, a world without racism, without sexism, without genderism, without ageism, without prejudice of any kind. What will it take for us to find this world, the one that God initially created, that God tells us will come again, a world without pain, without suffering, and with unending joy and peace and love? Where is this new world, and how do we get there? Well, today we celebrate Pentecost, and Pentecost literally means 50 days. It is 50 days after Easter Sunday, and for the Christian community, Pentecost is also known as the birthday of the church. Referring to our passage from Acts 2, we see the birth of Christ's church, with the arrival of the promised Holy Spirit coming down on all the disciples gathered in the room that day. Peter and the other 11 apostles and the other disciples there, both male and female, when suddenly, as our passage says, from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. At the end of the day, after we read that the crowds experience all of the disciples speaking to them in their own languages and hear a speech by Peter, 3,000 were baptized and added to the church as followers of Jesus Christ. From there, those new converts went back to their homes in every place around the known world and shared the good news of Jesus Christ. From this one event, the church began to grow and grow. It's a great story, isn't it? And it's a tradition for some of us to bake a birthday cake for the church and sing happy birthday. Yet, there's another side to this story that most of us never really consider. We get so hyped up on all the amazing things that happen because of the arrival of the Holy Spirit on these faithful followers that day that we don't stop to think about what it might actually have been like for the people in that room when the Spirit blew in. Some people think I'm strange, and I have to agree with them on many points, but one of the things I really want to do in my lifetime is see up close and personal a tornado. Yes, I've seen the destruction that usually comes. Yes, I know it's dangerous, and tornadoes don't care who was in their path. The death does happen in the path. I've seen videos from storm chasers, from news reports after devastating tornadoes have worn their way through entire communities, and I've cried at the loss of life. Yet I still want to see one. It fascinates me. I want to feel what it's like to have that wind blowing all around you, to see how things just get caught up and disappear in a giant spiral, and to watch it just dance across the landscape. People who had done just that talk about how beautiful it was, but also how frightened they were. That it was the scariest thing they had ever faced, like looking death in the eye. So I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and imagine that feeling. All that wind and the fear that comes from facing a natural phenomenon like that. Because you see, I often think that's how it felt to the disciples in that room on Pentecost. Violent wind, our passage says, filled the whole house where they so loud that it hurt their ears. It shook the roof, and they probably thought the whole house would come crashing down on them. And if that wasn't enough, little flames were falling on their heads. And no matter how artists have painted or depicted this moment, I think I would have run screaming from the building if fire was landing on my head. Now, maybe they didn't run out of the building, but they must have been scared, not knowing what was happening, hearing this violent wind and seeing the flames dancing all over the room. Could you be in a room filled with fire and just sit calmly waiting to see what would happen next? Pentecost was not a peaceful, gentle, happy birthday party. It was an act of God on a natural disaster scale. Like a mother giving birth to a child, the birth of the church came with pain, fear, and joy all mixed together. Now, kind of like a mother usually forgets all the struggle that came with giving birth and only remembers the joy of holding that new life in her arms, we as God's church often forget how the birth of the church came with both fear and joy. Giving birth to new life has never been a gentle, easy process. Imagine the creation of the world, if you will. God's Spirit, yes, this same Holy Spirit we're talking about today, hovered over the face of the earth, and God spoke the world into being. It started by separating the light from the dark, the sky from the waters, then land from the seas, and so on. And I don't know exactly how everything came together, but I can't imagine it just simply appeared all neat and orderly. But once the basic elements were there, God moved things around, created out of the materials He had just created. And if we had been there, we would have seen mountains rising from the seas, volcanoes spraying lava to make islands, oceans being contained, and the natural order was violent and powerful. The world was born with tremendous power, And if the earth had any feeling, a great amount of pain. As the surface of the earth changed in new and amazing ways, God was giving birth to a world where new life could experience the joy of living in it. Then God placed his crowning achievement right smack dab in the middle of the best spot, where life could be lived in love, in relationship with its creator, and in a beautiful, loving relationship with their fellow human beings. It was all that we would want the world to be. Yet sin changed it all. Sin is also a violent act. It changes the one who sins and the ones who suffer the consequences of those sins. The first sin was the most violent of all because it ripped all of humanity ever since from that beautiful world and that loving relationship with our Creator that we were meant to have. And that sin has given birth to individual acts of sin, such as murder, lying, stealing, abuse, and those things that we do that are not loving to God and to each other. But it has also given birth to what we call systemic sin, which includes racism and prejudice of all kinds, cultural ideas of class structure, sins that create inequality, wars, poverty, and many other ways that we have maintained those systemic sins that create barriers between us, create an us versus them ideology, and keep us from fully living into the kingdom that God has invited us to live in as his children. And if creation is a violent act because it changes everything, then recreation is also a violent act. Now, I love it when I read in the Bible words like Isaiah 43, 18 to 21. Do not remember the former things or consider things of old. I am about to do a new thing. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild animals will honor me, the jackals and the ostriches. For I give water in the wilderness, rivers in the desert, to give drink to my chosen people, the people whom I formed for myself, that they might declare my praise. See, when I read these words, I am overjoyed because here is God saying that he will take those places of our lives, where our world, where it seems to be filled with no life, and fill it with his life-giving presence. He will take a world where there is death and recreate it into a world of hope and light. But think about how that will happen. Sometimes God says he will make the way straight by leveling the mountains, filling in the valleys, causing streams to rise up out of the ground. And unless you believe in the wiggle your nose and it just appears theory, you have to know that wouldn't happen without earthquakes and floodwaters rising, without shifting the landscape in a natural disaster kind of way. For the wild animals and jackals to honor God, all of their animal instincts would have to go, utterly changing how they think and how they react. And it would not be an easy process on them either. Now you may be saying, well, Pastor Julie, they're animals, they're not people. But the truth is that even this passage has layers. And those animals spoken about in this passage probably do refer to people who have no control over their behavior and who have no thought for their fellow human beings or for God. God is saying he will give them new hearts and minds, hearts full of life-giving love for others, and minds that are compassionate and caring, that they will see the goodness of God and make their way to fulfilling the purposes for which they were created. See, changing both the landscape and people's hearts, their way of thinking, is a process that is hard. It's uncomfortable, maybe even painful, and it takes time. On the day of Pentecost, all this happened in an instant. Yes, the disciples had walked with Jesus and their hearts were already being changed. They already dreamed of the world that Jesus had shared with them was possible. But there was more work to be done. And in that moment, when the Holy Spirit descended on them, they were changed yet again. violent wind, tongues of fire, and they suddenly could speak to people in another language. As wonderful as this moment was, it also had to be one of the scariest times of their lives. I know that there have been times in my life when the Spirit has changed me. It certainly wasn't as momentous as Pentecost that day, but I felt my heart changed as I found myself sometimes more compassionate, sometimes more caring about someone's situation, especially in regards to the pain inflicted on them by the ignorance, abuse, or prejudice of others. These changes have not come easy. They've come with self-examination that has sometimes been both brutal and painful. And when I see how my actions have harmed others, when my lack of empathy or my apathy has added to the suffering of someone in need or those being abused, when my instincts for self-preservation or avoiding conflict have kept me from standing up in defense of those being oppressed, then the force of that shame causes me to change from the inside. I often think about the image God gives to Jeremiah of the potter reworking the clay into a more useful vessel. If you've ever played with clay and maybe played it, you know that it takes force to move the clay, to change the shape and mold it into what you want. This is how the Holy Spirit changes us as we walk with God. The Spirit speaks to us, shows us the attitudes and behaviors that will shape us and the world into the world God wants us to live in. It is recreating the world, one human being at a time, but through the same Spirit that lives in each one of us. See, Pentecost was an amazing day when God changed the hearts of so many people and gave birth, yes, with pain and fear, to a church that is the joy of his heart. No one could live through that and not be changed. Yet there were some who scoffed at the whole idea, just like there are still today. Faith is always a choice, and for those who believe it is a choice to live in another world, the one that God created for us, the world without pain, without sorrow, and without all the sin that still infects the earth. Because sin still has power in the world, there is pain and there is suffering. And the only way for God to make a way in the wilderness, to make rivers in the desert, and to bring this new world into being is through his people. The change starts here, in our hearts, through the power of the Holy Spirit. When we say yes to Christ, we have to understand that God will change us from the inside and be open and willing to let God make that change, painful and hard as it may be. We can't change what anyone else thinks or does. We can only let God change us. Every day should be our personal Pentecost. Will we open our hearts to see the sin that lives in us and in the world? Will we hear the hearts of those who are suffering from racism, from oppression, and take responsibility for our own participation, whether by our actions or our inactions? Will we trust God, that God is making a way for this new world, and that God is using his believers to help make that way? Will we step up and be the voice that admits to our sin and then works to bring in healing and justice to our world? In Revelation 21, we read about the new world we know will come. And I saw the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. Those who conquer will inherit these things. I will be their God, and they will be my children." Isn't this the world we long for? Pentecost reminds us of this promise, and that we will get there, but the journey will be filled with pain and suffering. As God's children, we are called to let the Holy Spirit mold us and change us as we work with God to give hope that this is not the way it is supposed to be, that there is a better world that is within our reach. On the first Pentecost, the Spirit gave all of them the ability to hear in other languages. And at the end of the day, those people came together and they shared all that they had in common as people of God. On this Pentecost, can we let the Spirit help us hear the language of our brothers and sisters, the people of color being oppressed, the women being abused and harassed just to keep their job, and those who are older are not given jobs because of their age? There's so much pain and suffering going on around there, but through the power of the Spirit, we can bring love to the world and be filled with the joy of seeing it come even today. But it starts with our own Pentecost. Let God recreate you. Let the Spirit blow through you in a mighty way. Take a good look at the world and see where God is calling you to change, so that together we can find this new world. Amen.
It's not to mark me, but it's a cross me. And then maybe when I'm wrong, you never see me. You longing to my love towards me, girl. I'm this so. I'm doing things and I'm doing wrong. I'm doing stand up and get glory with my life. It takes my confidence. Oh my God. My God is for me. He's not against me. So coming through there. Tell me who can shut me against me. So don't be too complete. I know. I made it so. See the one around me, and I'm forever well. It was not so very clear, no, I was see all these people very good for me. I'm so I'm doing that crazy, I'm really I'm really stand up, it's right now, yes. Still hope for me today. God of heaven loves me. There's still hope for me today. God of heaven loves me. There's still hope for me today. God of heaven loves me. There's still hope for me today. God of heaven loves me. I will praise Him, my great Redeemer. I will stand up and give glory with my life. He takes my darkness. praise Him. I'm gonna let God.
Praise God. Praise God. Thank you for being with us today. Next Sunday, we have a guest preacher. Reverend Dr. Rob Townsend, our Director of Connectional Ministries, will be here to preach the Word next Sunday and to deliver Holy Communion. So have yourself ready, and we will be so blessed, and I know you'll be blessed. So go in the grace and the peace of God, but be filled by the Holy Spirit. Amen.